I'll call the Time Service and Planning District Commission to order for our June 1st, 2023, 7 p.m. meeting. And we don't have to vote to allow Christine to participate. She can just participate, right? Let's get that. And we'll go to matters from the public. I do not see anyone here. Is anyone live online who would wish to give comment? See anyone? Any comments provided by email, website, online? Hear that as your email.
No, there was no comments submitted.
All right, so we'll go to 3A, presentation of the house.
Should we do a roll call?
Oh, yeah, sorry, roll call, please.
Councillor Payne, Commissioner Russell, Supervisor Andrews,
Here.
Mr. Smith, Supervisor Herring, Ms. Wilkinson, here. Supervisor Barlow,
Here.
Supervisor Jones, Supervisor Reed,
Here.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Here.
Supervisor O'Brien, Supervisor Galloway.
Present. Thank you, Ruth. So now we'll go to 3A, the housing preservation grant. So this is one of the items we'll work on later, but presentation first. And I see Lori is online. Where do you mean?
Yes, I am here. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. I'll be really brief tonight. I know I saw you last month. So tomorrow our goal is to put in our pre-application for the HPG Housing Preservation Grant for the coming year, which starts on October 1st. This is something that we have administered for the past, well, since 2015, when PHA asked us to take it over. It mostly provides rehabilitation for folks who are low income or very low income. It's through USDA. And we complete about 40 projects per year, a lot of roofs and electrical wiring work and ramps. You can only spend $5,000 from this grant per project. And our rural areas use it a lot and do some great work with it. This is just looking at the past year so far. We're a little bit over halfway through. And this is how much has been spent of the $250,000 that we have for the year by county. And you have that in your packets, so you can look at that in more detail. And then all of the subrecipients who can use these funds are only the counties, because the city of Charlottesville doesn't count as rural for USDA. And this is what we're asking for this year. It's a little bit lower than last year because the amount allocated to the state of Virginia is a little bit lower. And so that limits us in how much we can ask for. But overall, so it's $212,000 that we'll be asking for. So that leaves, after admin work that goes to a little bit to the subrecipients, a little bit, and then $31,000 to TJPDC. That leaves $174,000. And then all of the nonprofits contribute their own match funding, non-federal dollars of the same amount of 100% for the project amounts. So our goal is to, this is not officially a public hearing, but our goal is to, if you guys resolve tonight, to put in the pre-application as soon as possible. It's due on the 5th, which is very soon. And then assuming that we are able to be awarded again, then the program year will begin on September 1st. October 1st. That's a wrong date on there. Thank you so much. If there were any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions for Lori?
Is the rate of spending for 2022 what you would expect at this stage?
Yes. I want to say we had about 50,000 left earlier today when I sent all of our subrecipients an update. And that's great. They're definitely going to spend that all for sure. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, we'll come back to this item here in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take us to our next item, comprehensive economic development strategy. This is Ruth, and we have Alex and Daryl as well.
That's right. So As you know, we applied for and were awarded a comprehensive economic development strategy or CEDS grant last year from U.S. Economic Development Administration. We jointly procured Camoin, who's with us today, along with Region 10, Rapidan Regional Commission. The CEDS steering committee was kicked off in February. Des Moines recently prepared a data report for us, and that data was presented to the steering committee, and we thought it was a good time for you all to be updated on the project. So Alexandra Tranmer and Daryl Booker from Des Moines are here to present to you today.
Awesome. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us and letting us jump into your meeting tonight. Before I start, can everyone hear me okay in the room there? Okay,
Yep.
Head nods, good. Just stop me at any point if there's any sound issues. So what we've got on tap for tonight, like Ruth mentioned, we're really at the beginning stages of this comprehensive economic development strategy, or what we'll be referring to as the CEDS. We'll back up and talk a little bit about Des Moines, who we are, and sort of how we come to this project. But just to give some context as to, what this CEDS is all about, the role of the commission, the role of the commissioners, and really what it's going to mean for the region in terms of economic development opportunities. So like Ruth mentioned, we have put together our initial data analysis. So that includes a broad range of indicators that we will talk about tonight in a high level manner. We want to bring you through some of the top 5 findings of that data analysis. We'll share the full analysis after this, so you will have pages and pages of data to go through. All of that is we're looking at things at the regional level, with certainly context at the county and locality level. So we've got some of that granularity, but really understanding that we're looking for regional opportunities, shared opportunities across the region. So we'll talk a little bit about data. We'll talk a little bit about what the CEDS is all about. And then if we've got some time, get into a little bit of a conversation just to get the context of the commissioners and get some feedback from you guys initially at this stage. Again, just by way of introduction, so I'm Alex Tranmer with Camoin Associates, and my colleague Daryl is with us. Dan Gunderson, who is the strategy advisor for us on this project, unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, but some of you may recognize him. His previous role before Camoin was at VEDP. So he is, very familiar and integrated with economic development and workforce within the state of Virginia. I will play the role of project principal as we go through this project. I have worked on strategic plans with Camoin Associates for the last almost 10 years, many of those actually within the state of Virginia. We work all over the country. I'm based in upstate New York. Dan is in Richmond, and Daryl is down in Columbia, South Carolina. So we've got your Camoiners sort of covering the country here, and we're excited to get down into the area and visit and really see what's happening on the ground. Daryl, I'll let you just introduce yourself as well while we're here.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and good evening, everyone. As Alex mentioned, I'm Daryl Booker, and I'm the project manager with Camoin Associates. Been with Camoin for just a little bit under a year, but my background is in economic development, particularly here in South Carolina. We're rural communities here in South Carolina, but glad to be a part of this project and look forward to sharing some data with you tonight.
All right, so just again, by way of introduction, for those of you who might not be familiar with Camoin, we are a full service economic development firm. And I say this just so that you can sort of understand how we come to this CEDS. We do strategic plans, we do economic impact analysis, grant writing, grant administration, real estate market analysis. We really have a holistic view of economic development, and that's what we intend to bring to this process as well. Been in business for just over 20 years and have grown rapidly really in the mid-Atlantic and southern states. We are a fully remote company. We were sort of one of those companies that took the pandemic as a sign to give up our office and have hired remotely ever since. So that's really opened up our opportunities across the country. This is just a quick map to show sort of the experience that we've got within the state. Like I mentioned, Dan is in Richmond and has previously worked for VETP. And as County Associates, we've worked in, I mean, you can see nearly every corner of the state. So we've really got an understanding of really the macroeconomics of not just your region, but the state and country as well. Okay, so now that we are through introductions, let's talk a little bit about what a SEDS is. Has anyone been involved in a SEDS or the planning process or been involved in this type of strategy before? It doesn't look like it. Okay, I just wanted to get some context. So the SEDS is essentially a tool, a resource that is sanctioned by the Economic Development Administration, or the EDA, that really focuses on regional strategic planning. So planning across sort of political, jurisdictional boundaries in an effort to really work toward the collective vision, a collective goal, really look at resource sharing, understanding sort of, right, we're all not just little islands, not just little economies sort of moving on our own, that really looking at a broader picture across a region. In this case, I'm Thomas Jefferson Regional Planning Commission, that those boundaries, that's what we're working with here, and really looking to understand sort of what the economic opportunities are across that region. So this is sort of the technical, definition that the EDA gives. If we really just want to put it in sort of plain language, what a SEDS really is, we're really looking to create economic opportunity across this region, really understanding the data behind that, making informed decisions about where markets are going, where the economy is going. So that's one piece, the data, really making informed decisions, engaging with businesses on the ground, which is part of our process, and really understanding what factors are impacting those businesses. And then the third sort of pillar, I would say, is the partnerships, collaborations, the economic developers, the commissioners that are really going to be collaborating to execute this plan. The span of the plan covers 5 years. So that's the time frame that we're working within. And I think it's important to point out here that the commission is sort of the convener and facilitator of this plan, but they are not tasked with completing the entire thing, right? This is really meant to be a collaborative effort, and ultimately the economic development and workforce items that are likely going to come out of this are going to be a collaborative and joint effort. So I point that out to say, right, there are going to be some subjects and themes that probably are not maybe typical of what the commission might oversee, but it's really important to still include those and still look at those as part of this process, and understand therefore then how the commission would facilitate those actions over the next 5 years, even if they themselves, their staff, the commissioners, are not the ones advancing that work. At the same time that you guys, Thomas Jefferson, is doing their SEDS, we're also doing one with Rappahannock Rapidan, as Ruth mentioned. And so they're going to have their own project. At the end of this too, we want to look across both regions and look at what the opportunities, the alignments are across the two planning districts, what we're calling super regional strategies, And that's a pretty unique approach. I have not seen that in many other cases. So I think it's an exciting opportunity to really work across boundaries and really, in some cases, build up a concentration of opportunity really across the region. So let me just tackle this and then I'll pause. This is just, again, sort of summarizing what the outlook for the SEDS is. Just to put a finer point on the role of the commission and the commissioners themselves. I think I would just emphasize the sort of role as facilitator and convener, even if the subjects or topics are not ones that the commission would typically take on. There's going to be a lot of other partners and collaborators involved in this, but I think the biggest role is going to be championing the plan once it's done, and the strategies, right? The execution is really going to be the where momentum picks up and where a real difference is going to be made in terms of economic opportunity in the region. So I think thinking about this process is sort of building momentum, looking at opportunities, and then at the end, the commission really owning the plan and continuing to almost project manage it and continue to move it forward with the appropriate parties is going to be really important for the success of the SEDS. So let me pause there and just see if there's any questions from anyone in the room.
Questions at this time? I think we're good right now.
We're good? Okay, I will keep moving then. All right, so the data, which is what we're going to focus on a little bit tonight. Again, this is, we're taking you through a lot of data in a short amount of time, but I think this gives a pretty good summary of essentially what we're trying to get at this point. And again, this is just the sort of beginning stages of our analysis. I imagine we'll get more into the detail of some of the industries as we go along in this process, but we want to determine and clarify who is living in the region. So look at their age and household composition, their income brackets, and other characteristics that really give us a picture of who is living in the region. We want to evaluate the economy. So that means, of course, looking at jobs, specific industries and subsectors, wages, commuting patterns, who's leaving, who's coming in, why are people maybe living here and commuting out, or vice versa. All of those sort of market shifts that, of course, the pandemic have exacerbated in some cases. So we're working to sort of piece together what that latest story is, because the data in some cases does not necessarily catch up with reality. And then lastly, looking at market trends in terms of real estate. So industrial, office, retail, understanding, what the market is like right now. And then once we determine what the industries are that are best suited for growth, really making sure that there's alignment between where industries have to grow, that they have a place to grow, essentially. So that's the sort of quick overview of how we're using the data. Like I mentioned, we wanted to focus on 5 key takeaways from the report, and then go through some of the specific data points that help us get to these 5 points. So first one focuses on population. We've had, in the last decade, the Thomas Jefferson region their population growth has outpaced both the state and the US. So at just over 12%. Again, that's in the last decade, 2010 to 2020. We'll look at the breakdown there, because that's obviously different between counties and localities, and understanding, right, the differences and unique factors within the region is important. We're not looking at the region as a monolith, right? There are really unique factors across the region. So that's population. In terms of the economy, the data really reflects what I'm sure everyone perceives, that the public sector in terms of education and hospitals really drives the economy in terms of GRP, gross regional product, and employment. Clearly UVA is sort of a powerhouse unto itself, and then sort of, spreading throughout the region, but there are other subsectors that are showing positive growth that I think are interesting to connect to other opportunities, whether that's, agritourism, agribusiness, the innovation corridor that I believe it was Louisa County that has just instituted or is working towards. So some of the industries besides the public sector that show growth for transportation and warehousing, professional, scientific, and technical services, and then manufacturing as well. So we'll get into a couple of those nuances just to show what else is growing in the region. The third takeaway here, again, just looking at some of the other industries that are contributing to the region in terms of gross regional product. So in terms of overall economic activity, there was major growth in wholesale trade, management of companies, and finance and insurance. So again, I think sort of interesting. I believe that's 2017 to 2021, so quite recent. Really trying to understand what that recent growth is focused around. Takeaway number 4 focuses on the top occupation for the workers that are commuting into the region. So again, probably not a surprise necessarily, but important to have those figures and data behind it. But teachers, nurses, and sort of office personnel, major commuters into the region. And then the last one, number 5, focuses on real estate. I've seen strong demand both in warehouse and distribution space, which has drawn vacancies down to just about 1%, which is clearly a very, very tight market, which obviously has implications for potential growth or expansion or attraction into the region. And so that's going to play a big role in sort of looking at the future opportunities of the region as well. So what we've got here is a few slides that's going to elaborate on some of those data points. Daryl's going to go through that data. At any point, feel free to jump in here and ask a question. We are going to cover it relatively quickly. And like I mentioned, you are going to get the full report after this, so you'll be able to dive in more. Consider this sort of the summary before you get the full report.
Thank you, Alex. So this, as Alex mentioned, just want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the data, how we pulled away our key takeaways. So this is just looking at the population of the region and the localities that make up the region going back to 1990. So as Alex mentioned, the entire region grew by 12.3% from 2010 to 2020. And when you look at the chart, you can see that the region has really had steady growth since 1990. And that growth is still projected to kind of continue until 2030, 2040, and all the way up to 2050. When you look at the individual localities within the region, we do see some strong growth. The largest growth was in the city of Charlottesville that saw 15% growth from 2010 to 2020. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the smallest percent change was seen in Nelson County that lost 2% of their population over that same time period. In the report, you will see that we did note that Albemarle County and the city of Charlottesville does account for approximately 6% of the region's population. And when you compare those two localities going out to 2050, that percent share of the population will hold steady. Next slide, Alex. So this one is trying to take a different look at population change. In this chart, we are looking at the changes in households from 2010 to 2020. Once again, the region as a whole grew at about 12%, which outpaced the growth of both the state and the nation. All localities in the region, except for Nelson County, kept pace with or grew faster than the state and national growth rate of 9%. So region-wide, strong household growth, and then pretty much all the counties or all the localities had some signs of growth, which is a good sign. So in keeping kind of with the changes in the household, the migration chart looks at household migration patterns from each locality in the year 2020. So when we aggregate the localities' net gains, we do see that the region as a whole did net about 776 new households in 2020. And then outside of Albemarle, adding 489 households, Louisa saw the biggest jump in net household migrations with 564. So once again, all these demographics show that the region as a whole is growing and is really outpacing both the state and national averages when it comes to these population trends.
I'll just make a note on the data here too. So this data is actually from the IRS. And so basically when someone changes their address on their taxes, that basically our data sources sort of capture that change. And so that's how we're able to get to these migration numbers. And so it's particularly interesting, I think, for 2020. Obviously, that was a outlier of a year based on historic patterns. And so you see right that the movement out of Charlottesville in that 1 year. So just sort of interesting again to look at context and the timing of the data really matters in terms of findings.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. So now we're kind of moving to the age trends of the region. So when you're looking at the region, the age distribution does skew towards teens and young adults, with the greatest share of your region's residents being age 15 to 24, when you're also comparing that to the state or the national average. We do account that being, skewed that way because of 20% of Charlotte's population does fall within that 15 to 24-year-old age range. So that's the reason why we feel that it's skewing younger. When you're looking at the other age cohorts, the region has slightly fewer younger adults when you're looking at age 30 to about 49 years old when you're comparing to the state or the US average. And then the region has slightly more adults than the state and nation when you're getting to 65 years old or plus. So in our report, we do break it down by median age for each county. And so you can see in our report that, of course, Charlottesville will be the youngest county in the region by median age. The region as a whole has a median age of 39.5, which is a tick older, which is a tick older than Virginia at 39.2, and then the US average at 38.9. So transition to kind of looking at the employment of the region. As you can see, Albemarle County is leading the region in total employment for 2022 at just over 64,500 jobs, which is followed by City of Charlottesville at 44,200 jobs. The entire region for 2020 had about 133,000 jobs. And once again, when you account for Albemarle and Charlottesville, they make up more than 80% of the region's employment. So a lot of concentration of employment in those two localities. And then this is just kind of looking at the growth of the employment from 2017 to 2022 in the region. The region as a whole grew by 3%. And once again, this is outpacing the state and national growth rates. The state grew at 1.3%, while the US grew at 1.9%. Now, in the previous slide, we saw that Albemarle and Charlottesville held pretty much the lion's share of employment. But in this slide, you can see that in that time frame from 2017 to 2022, Fluvanna was actually the fastest growing locality within the region at 5.7%. Albemarle did come in second with 5.1% growth, but Charlottesville only grew by 0.8%. So not as much growth as you would expect from Charlottesville, but it still is growing. So that's always a positive when you're growing. The only outlier was Nelson County during this time period that saw a negative 5.4 in their employment change from 2017 to 2022. And so this is a little bit of a busy chart. So probably just take just a second to kind of explain this one. On the horizontal axis, you have percent change in job growth from 2017 to 2022. On the vertical axis, you have the location quotient for 2022. And so location quotient, or LQ, which you refer to in the report, is really just a measure of job concentration in the region compared to that job concentration to the nation. So an LQ of 1 means that the region has the same amount of concentration of that job and industry as the nation does. Anything above a 1 means that that particular job and industry is more concentrated in the region than in the nation. So we have 4 different categories. Leading industries, which include government and office services. Those are industries that have experienced job growth over the last 5 years and also have a location quotient of greater than 1. Emerging industries, which as you can see are the rapidly growing industries, they saw positive growth over the last 5 years, but do not quite have that LQ of 1, that concentration of 1. And then the maturing industries in the yellowish color, where you see utilities and agriculture, they have a LQ of greater than 1, but had negative job growth over the last 5 years. And then the last sector we have is the lagging industries, and they saw an LQ of less than 1, so low concentration, and then also saw negative job growth over the last 5 years. So this kind of is a good visual to show you, what industries you might need to focus on as far as targeting, or maybe even focus on seeing if you can maybe give them a little bit more assistance to, turn them from an emerging industry to a leading industry. And then so on this one, we just kind of want to take a deeper dive into the 2 leading industries, which you have were government and other services. And then you see the job growth of jobs in the government was right at 41,800. And then the other services accounted for about 8,200 jobs. When you look at the emerging industries, which are the ones that are growing but not as concentrated, professional, scientific, and technical services accounted for 8,200 jobs, and they saw 11% growth from 2017 to 2022. And within the region, they held about 6.2% of the region's job share. And so their LQ is just right at a 0.9. So really just shy of that 1% concentration from the region compared to the nation. And, when you're looking at the sectors that make that industry up, you see computer systems designs, scientific research and development. So that can all be probably tied to UVA, the hospital, and industries like that. Healthcare and social assistance have a little bit more jobs in the region at 12,400. They also saw strong job growth from 2017 to 2022. They grew 11.1%. Also hold a high share of jobs at 9.3%, and once again has an LQ of a 0.7. So really, this industry probably in the next 5 to 10 years will probably be moving from an emerging industry to a leading industry. And the top subsectors for that industry are, of course, your doctor's offices and then the individual family and services.
And just something to point out here too, right, as we look at the top subsectors and sort of change in job growth over that 5-year period, we're not, this is sort of our initial scan, right? So we're certainly interested in these subsectors, but really understanding the supply chains of the subsectors and who works in them, and where might there be opportunities that are particularly suited to this area, because of certain strengths, maybe based on the pipeline with UVA or other educational institutions in the region. It's really all about sort of looking for the connections and opportunities between some of these subsectors, and maybe some jump out more than others. So this is really our starting point. And, we want to make sure that that our work aligns with Go Virginia, and looking at the subsectors that they highlight as well in terms of growth targets. And so, we're in contact with them as well, really to make sure we're all moving towards that shared vision in terms of economic opportunities in certain industries.
So
Did you-
this slide, I'm sorry, was there a question?
Oh, go ahead, Daryl.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody ask a question. This slide, with the public sector being such a large industry in the region, we wanted to kind of drill down on really what subsectors make up the public sector. So as you can see, in 2022, the highest job counts did come from colleges, universities, and professional schools with 18,000 jobs, or just over 44% of the job share. Hospitals were next with 7,000 jobs, and they made up 17.4% of the job share. So when you look at the education industries with the colleges, universities, and then elementary and secondary, their total job count is over 24,450. So almost more than 50% of job share is in the education industry in the region. And so looking at the other top subsectors, this looks at the subsector job growth from 2017 to 2022. Government and healthcare subsectors in particular have seen strong job growth over the last 5 years. They had added a total, when you combine them, over 4,041 jobs. The high number in the education hospital subsectors is, as you all know, is driven primarily by UVA, which is a huge economic engine in the region. But you also do see individual and family services, which is being driven by services for the elderly and disabled. They have seen pretty strong growth over the last 5 years as well. So if you take out the state government, you can see that your region has a lot of diverse industries that are adding jobs. So, which is pretty good for the region. And so now we're looking at kind of the GRP growth by sectors from 2017 to 2021. The top growth sector was wholesale trade, which grew by 73%. And this job growth was being driven by, wholesale trade agents and brokers. Second largest growth sector was management of companies, that grew by 54%. And then when you look at the largest two industries of government or public sector and healthcare, public sector grew by 19% and healthcare grew by 17%. But once again, you can see that your region has a good mix of subsectors and good, strong growth in a lot of different areas.
Oops.
So this map is just kind of getting into the commuting patterns of the localities. and whether they are net importers or net exporters of commuters. So as you can see from the map, Albemarle and Charlottesville are net importers of commuters. And that's probably to be expected with them having over 80% of the region's employment. So this kind of shows just where the top, yeah, you can go to the next slide. I was thinking that this kind of shows where the top occupations are driving into the region from. Not only driving into the region, but residents are remaining in the region for work as well. So the top one was post-secondary school teachers that had net commuters of 1,232. Registered nurses came in at 935 net commuters, and office clerks came in at 510 net commuters. So having post-secondary teachers, registered nurses, and office clerks being the top three makes sense, with once again UVA and the hospital systems being such a big driver in the regional economy. And then this one dives just a little bit into the real estate of the region. Non-residential real estate inventory in the region is right at 3.1 million square feet in 2022. Retail is the largest share of that, and that represents 11.3 million square feet. And industrial is at 17%, but there is such a strong demand for warehouse and distribution in the region that the vacancy rates for industrial sector has gone down to 1%. When you compare that with the U.S. average of 4%, the region really is running out of available industrial product to market. Office space is the second largest sector at 30%, and that's 10 million square feet. They are seeing a vacancy rate of 8%, which is ticking up, but it's still quite a few basis points lower than the U.S. average of 16%. So with the trend of remote workers, remote work still being a hot topic issue, seeing more vacant offices is more of a trend than an anomaly. So overall, you have a good mixture of real estate in the region, and your vacancy rates are in line, if not lower than the U.S. average.
All right, I think so. That is our last data slide. And I know we covered a lot here. I'll just wrap up and say, I think our next step really is sort of the so what, right? With all of this data, we've got a lot of different pieces and are starting to put the story together, but ultimately, right, we know the question is, well, what does this mean for our localities and for economic potential moving forward? And so that's sort of what the next couple months we'll look at. But let's pause there before we go to any discussion or conversation and just see if we've got any initial questions. I want to make sure we answer those, if there's any in the room.
Nelson County is staying the same with what I saw.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm in Nelson County, so looking at your numbers was really interesting. Do you see any consistencies for contexts like Nelson in other rural parts of the United States or Virginia?
Yeah, so meaning sort of as it relates to maybe its surrounding counties and maybe more urban areas, like are there similar things happening in rural counties?
Yeah, just what is the trends? Because and the reason why I'm leading this is discussion of young families in rural communities.
Yeah.
And that's more difficult as time goes on. I had a discussion with some school people today, and one, they say, we'll bring the families. Well, I think even if we brought families nowadays, there's still no kids. I just don't know if you see any trends like that.
Well, yeah, changing household composition and smaller in general, smaller household composition, sort of delayed timing and having kids, I think fair to say a nationwide just trend. But to the point of more rural communities, you know, the community element of schools and housing, and really the combination of those two things, right, are almost stifling like the movement into rural counties in some cases, just because housing is so limited. And so we didn't necessarily touch on that today, but I imagine that's going to be quite a topic moving forward in terms of right, employers need workforce, even if there's a trend towards remote work. You know, I think it's fair to say a majority of work is still happening in and off, you know, on site. And so how do you bring that employment in if the workforce is hesitant or just can't move because of lack of housing or unaffordable housing? All right.
One question,
Yeah, of course.
sorry to be late, but seeing the slide about the vacancy rate for office space. I'm curious if you have any thoughts, if that number is higher in Charlottesville and Albemarle in particular, and if you're looking at that trend line in comparison to other localities in Virginia. One of the conversations we hear from people in the community is, well, you might want to start thinking now about a future for these new office spaces that have been built that is not going to be office space or exclusively office space. Are you seeing that as kind of the trend line? Are you seeing like a strong rebound, or does it seem like a higher level of vacancy rates that question whether some of these are economically sustainable is just kind of like the norm now?
So I think my initial response just to I think it's been a slow rebound. There's been upward, or I guess downward movement on the vacancy rate. So some, you know, positive in terms of moving back to the office, but certainly not at a rate that, you know, is going to fix the vacancy problem, I would say, particularly in sort of more central business district areas. I can't remember off the top of my head, Daryl. I don't know if you've got that in front of you, like the breakdown, if we can see the difference.
Yeah, so really the vacancy, when you're looking at office, we did break it down by county, and really what is bringing down the office vacancy rates for the region is Fluvanna County, which is really at a zero vacancy. They don't have any office space available. But on the other end of that spectrum, Albemarle has vacancy rates over 10%. So it does vary strongly depending on the county or locality in the region. But as far as office space coming back, I think, as Alex said, it's going to be a slow trend, and I think we're just kind of in a wait and see pattern right now. A lot of companies want to be back in office, but I think the workforce is kind of banded together and holding the ground with remote workers. So, like I said, I think it's just going to be a wait and see thing. Probably not the answer you want, but I think it's just too early to tell.
Thank you.
All right, well, there's going to be a lot more to dive into, and there will be a lot more at the local level. So again, we want, you know, this information is meant, you know, for you all to make informed decision in your community as you need. This is going to be the most up-to-date labor market, workforce, real estate information that's available. So, you know, feel free to reach out. I'll put our contact information on at the end of the slide. So you've got that, and don't hesitate to reach out with any questions on that as it applies to the region or to your community. I know we just have a few minutes left here, and we've covered a lot of data, but I'm interested, you know, maybe your mind sort of got warmed up there with how some of this applies to your community. And I think I just want to focus on the first question there, maybe do a round robin of just folks in the room of, you know, maybe one economic or community asset, and I mean that really in the broadest sense, what's one thing that's underutilized or that has a lot of economic potential in, you know, in your region, or one that you know of sort of in the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission region more broadly? You know, I think we can, you know, pick out sort of the obvious economic drivers and the data tells us certain things, but I'm curious about, you know, maybe the things that don't get as much attention or are emerging that really have potential in the region. Is there anything that comes to mind? It could be an industry, it could be a particular business, it could be.
Well, it's not really an industry or it'd be more of an asset, but the way our specifically Albemarle and Charlottesville are intertwined with transportation issues, that it doesn't even function well for cars, which is what it's designed for, but the multimodal deficiencies that exist truly in those two jurisdictions prevents certain economic activity from happening. So we've just had two, like we had one development in a very high commuter area who cannot fill their office space. If you were the owner of a person that wouldn't go into that office space, you'd be out of your damn mind and put a business in there because nobody's going to come there because of the transportation issues. And there's no other way to get there but by car, because you'd be, except for the 100 and so people that live right next to it. So, you know, we have a bike or a big bridge that's going to go over Fluvanna River. Like the Fluvanna River is an asset that's underutilized because we don't really have great access to it in a lot of places. I'm not saying we want to develop along the river and put you know what I mean, put things along it, but you know, we just wanted to connect two economic zones in the county to the city from our Pantops location with a big bike ped bridge, and it's $42 million to put out, or $51 million or whatever it was. But that would be an economic boon because it would connect two areas in a way that doesn't rely on car traffic. Because getting from Pantops to downtown Charlottesville, you might as well pack a lunch and, you know, plan what, 4 hours a day is the commute.
And
That's helpful. And is that, so particularly the multimodal is bike and pedestrian infrastructure in particular as alternatives to automobile?
It just is not, you know, I think when, you know, you just can't get around this area very well. And if you're going out to do economic activity, I think it's done in its chunks because you really have to be like, I'm going to this area or this area, and what am I going to accomplish from that?
So making sure that, really making sure that traffic in whatever pedestrian, whatever format that may be, car, bike, or pedestrian, flows so that it does not inhibit economic activity, but encourages it. Not that there's sort of movement available to be able to reach office space, businesses, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And my two were literally, I was literally gonna say a bus system in the river. But reading through this data, I mean, it's clear how if you created a regional transit authority, there could be a huge positive economic impact, especially on the university and hospital system and major employers in particular. And definitely agree. I think in Fluvanna River, you can see how it can become kind of a signature, unique destination that is kind of on par with something like Asheville's River Arts District in terms of driving people coming in and visiting that location.
Right.
That one, Amtrak.
I love trains. I think one thing that is also to be mentioned is in the rural context, the work from home aspect has definitely changed a lot of different factors, especially real estate demand and whatnot. Now I don't know how familiar you guys are with the regional internet hookup with Firefly and then other entities. Nelson County certainly has seen a change in economy and commerce when the work from home aspect came to play, especially in, my goodness, I mean, there's so many people now who work nationally and internationally in Nelson County that it's just changed the whole context of what a job looks like. So I don't know where that fits in there, but it's definitely something that's a big enough percentage. David, isn't the number for Nelson like 10% or 15% or something like that work from home?
I'm not
I don't remember what it was, but it was up in that range, so.
Yeah,
And that's, oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say, when you're looking at employment data with the remote workers, because we had to do a little bit deeper dive on this from our SES committee meeting. The remote workers, even though they are housed or live in Nelson County, if their company is located in New York or California, their job counts where that company is located. So Nelson County could be getting an influx of employment that are work from home, but it's not counted for Nelson County.
What if I like to that kind of, I think that data changes.
So it could be even higher, yeah, than,
Yeah.
you know, you guys are feeling. Is that and that did come up in the SES committee meeting that Firefly in particular had, it just sort of changed, you know, the opportunities that were available. Are you finding that that's sort of centered around the individual, like individuals are working from home more, or that it's attracting businesses as well?
I mean, I can't really name too many work from home businesses that came to Nelson, other than people got jobs for them. You know, maybe some startup people who did, and you just have no clue. You know,
Right,
but I'd venture to say it's the latter. You know.
yeah. Well, that does get, I mean, we're still figuring out and, you know, how to most accurately quantify work from home is difficult, you know, it's challenging just because it's sort of a new landscape. All right, so we've got broadband, transportation, particularly in a regional context, the Fluvanna River in terms of connecting to economic zones. I mean, natural, that was a category I forgot to add, but yeah, natural resources or natural assets. Anything else anyone wanted to get on there?
Yeah, Alex, this is Christine online. I just wanted to underscore, I think I couldn't tell who said it, but the Amtrak station, you know, the size of that facility compared to the amount of through travel going through there, I think there's a lot of potential there that hasn't been realized for bringing people, especially related to the university, whether that be, you know, professors, bringing people into the region for work. So I just wanted to underscore the Amtrak.
Gotcha, yep, okay. All right. Well, I think we'll probably end with that then and just sort of wrap up with these next steps. This is just looking out really until the beginning of, well, the first quarter of next year, 2024. You know, we've got engagement that's sort of coming up next. So we'll be on the ground at some point during the summer, really looking to see a wide range across the region and talk to businesses, economic developers, workforce development professionals. You know, maybe some of you all, we really want to, you know, get the flavor and unique factors for each of the localities. So we've got some engagement coming up, in addition to some additional data. All of the comments and sort of feedback that we got today help sort of put together the theme and channels we need to go down for additional work. But we are working towards early next year in terms of final report, implementation plan, all of that good stuff. And you'll be hearing from us throughout the project. And I will leave, I'll go back to this at the end too, but again, don't hesitate in between when you see us to reach out to Daryl and I with any questions or contributions to the discussion. Daryl, do you just want to sort of highlight the next steps that we've got here too?
Yeah, so as Alex kind of mentioned, our next focus will be kind of getting that stakeholder engagement. So we have a lot of the data, the quantitative data, but we really need to mirror that with the qualitative data so we get a full picture. We are in the process of doing the business climate resiliency inventory, just looking at different ways that the region has been resilient in different sectors. Of course, our on-site visit and then our situational assessment. So really I think we're in a good place with the project, but we still have a little ways to go. So having these meetings is valuable to get your feedback. So once again, after this presentation, if you think of something that would be helpful for us, or you have a thought, please just let us know.
Christine or Ruth, is there anything that you want to wrap up with on either the process or the content where we go from here?
Sure, I just want to, just thank Alex and Daryl and y'all's team for the work that you're doing on this. The SEDS kind of came about from a request from economic development staff in a couple of our jurisdictions to pursue a SEDS plan since one had not been completed previously. Many regions pursue a SEDS in order to then pursue becoming an economic development district. That isn't necessarily our goal. However, it can leverage opportunities to get additional EDA grant funds that are only available if there is an existing SEDS plan in place. And so we see this as, a good way to look at the synergy that's occurring and looking across jurisdictional boundaries to create these regional and super regional strategies. But in no way is that intended to usurp or, guide the local economic development decisions that are made. And like Alex said, a lot of the work that's going to be happening to implement will still be done at the local level and not necessarily at the regional level. So while I think a regional approach on this is incredibly valuable, it is not in place of the very necessary local approach to economic development. So just thank you to Alex and Daryl for being here tonight. And we will send out to you all as commissioners a copy of their full report so that you have access to all of the data and all of the tables in a lot greater detail even than tonight.
That'll go out when? The report?
Would you like it tonight?
Yeah.
Okay.
We will send it to you right away.
Any other questions or comments here? All right, thank you, Alex and Daryl.
Thanks so much,
Thank
guys.
you.
Good night.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing that whole report. So we go to number 4, we go to quorum now present, so just in time. To the consent agenda, so we have the minutes of May 4th, 2023. Any items there that need to be adjusted or edited or changed?
No, I can do a quick comment on the financials if that's okay. We have just under 8.5 months of average operating expenses available. 5 months is the goal, so we're in good place there. We've got just over 2 months of unrestricted cash on hand. And then as you'll see in the financial dashboard report, we had a very strong March and April with very large net gains, actually atypical gains for us. But I want to make sure to couch that with the idea that that is inflated because again, we're going to be doing the cleaning up of all the legacy payables and receivables and end of fiscal year bonuses. And so we don't anticipate that net gain to be as high as it's reported right now.
Questions for Christine on the financials? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. All right, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That. And we do not have any new business tonight. So we'll move to our resolutions. The first is the intergovernmental review and resolution of support for the housing preservation grant, which we received the presentation on. So we'll need a motion to approve. Any other comments or anything there? We just need the action. Yep, motion to approve the resolution of intergovernmental review and project support for housing preservation grant. Anyone? So move. Second. And all in favor, say aye.
Uh,
Opposed? That's approved. And item B, under resolutions, resolution to elect officers for fiscal year 2024. The committee brought forth the slate of the same folks in playing positions from the prior year. Didn't seem like there was objection to that, so is there a motion to elect the officers for fiscal year 2024 as presented? So moved.
Check.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is approved. Thank you. That will bring us quickly to the executive director's report. Christine? You are muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Quick couple of updates for VADI. I did send around to you all that we were not awarded the VADI 2023 grant. We have attended listening sessions on BEAD, which is the new federal broadband equity access and deployment program, the federal BEAD program. We are under the understanding that, a few $100 million will be coming to the state of Virginia related to broadband. And so we are paying attention to that funding along with, all of the ISPs that are paying attention to that funding. So we'll have more of an update. They are still in the process of developing the program guidelines, both for this next round of VADI state funds, but also for what they're going to be calling VADI BEAD funds. And so staff will be paying attention to both of those programs as the program guideline drafts come out. They will open it up to public comment before releasing them in their final form. Other comment is for transit, the mobility management program. We did issue an RFP for that and received proposals, and we're now in the negotiating phase to get a partner to help us staff the call center for mobility management. Also related to transit, for the transit governance, we're in the stage now where we're scheduling meetings in each of our local jurisdictions so that we can have more one-on-one discussions rather than in the large steering committee, just to talk about goals for transit and, as Councilor Payne suggested, the movement towards a regional transit authority, and whether or not there is interest in the rural areas for participating, or if the urban areas want to do that. And then the Safe Streets and Roads for All grants that is now in full swing. We are under contract. We've issued the request for proposal for a consultant, and we have met with all 6 of our jurisdictions. And then now we're in the process of meeting with VDOT so that we can look at the full scope of work and make sure that we map into that process all of the correct touch points with VDOT and their traffic engineering team, so that the work that they're doing with local jurisdictions and the work that we're doing with Safe Streets and Roads for all dovetail together and don't work against one another. And then another small thing is, I just wanted to bring this up. I talked to Commissioner Wilkinson about this a bit before the meeting, but one thing with our new finance director and Hansman Wiebel that has given us a slight pause, we're not in any way having heartburn over it, is often we're bringing to you all the financials to approve. And then it is often the case that we then have to go back and amend those financials because of the timing of the commission meetings being the first week of the month, in order to get those financials prepared a week in advance and get them out to you all. There are often changes that need to occur. And I just wanted to make sure that you all were still comfortable with that. The alternative would be to delay those financials another month. So for example, we are now in June, you would be getting March's financials in June. And so we recognize that that's a long delay for you all to have, fiscal responsibility of looking through the financials. And so I'm not suggesting a change necessarily. I'm just calling attention, as our new finance director and Hansman and Weevil have noticed, that what you're approving often gets amended. And if that is still okay with you all, we will continue to proceed as usual. If that causes you pause, then we might want to think through a different process to make sure what it is that you're approving is the final set of financials. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, or if you want to give me any feedback.
Big reactions here.
Only that, I don't know if it were considered, it would be changing the meeting date.
That what he said, this has been brought up many times in the past, but the date that we have is one that does not have a board meeting in any jurisdiction on that date. And I don't know if we can get around it, but the fact that this has been an ongoing problem forever, that the meeting is so early in the month.
It would conflict with other committee assignments.
At this point, most other localities design their schedules. I mean, I know we have, like when we do our comprehensive planning and all that, we schedule around it.
I kind of think we have, I don't know, I think we put a long way we've been is what I can say. Historically, I can say that we used to have a 3-month lag on our financial statements, much more detriment. Now that we don't, I would go back the other way. So we managed to, if it isn't perfectly right and it needs to be fixed later, well, at least we have something that we can see to help the ship steer in the right direction. And one example of that this year is you were talking about a particular affordable housing grantor that was very late paying. And so it was very clear to us as well as you that that was not a thing that could go on just the way it was. But if we hadn't seen the statements for, if they were 3 months delayed, that may not have been as clear to us certainly, and maybe not even to you. So I think it does serve, that's certainly not the only example I could give. Many times in the past, we got in a bad spot. David can remember all this stuff.
I put it out of my mind.
You're trying not to say, she's trying. The thing is, we've been going along on a good course, and the timing information, even if it's not perfect, I think is really helpful.
Great. If you all are comfortable with us moving forward the way that we have been going, with the understanding that the financials as they're presented are at that point in time, and they're not yet at the point where we have closed that month to any revisions, then we're comfortable doing the same.
The only other thing I could say is there's sometimes a detail getting in the weeds of when something should properly be in the financial statement. So, you know, if somebody can't, some particular vendor can't come across with their invoice, why, and does it even belong, where does it, what month does it really belong in? So that's another thing you can look at.
Yeah, that's definitely something we're looking to revise, because the practice has been in the past under Mr. Reed, that if we receive something 3 months late and they say, oh, we forgot to invoice you, and they send us a bill, he would go back and amend the financials 3 months prior. And we're beginning to move towards, we're going to journal entry that in the current month and make that change under the current set of financials without going back and amending previous financial statements.
We think will help solve a lot of your problems. So.
Yes. Yep. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that you guys supported that and knew as you're approving the financials that they are as close as they can be to accurate without, you know, small revisions that may need to occur after you see them.
Great. Any other comments?
Nope. The only other thing I have is that is after the roundtable session, you're gonna talk about the next commission meeting being a special session to discuss the strategic planning. That's Thursday, June 22nd. And I wanted feedback from you all on your thoughts on that work session being in person or virtual. The purpose of that would be to share the survey results and to look at the feedback that we're getting from our 6 jurisdictions on what our priorities should be for the next 3 years, and then a discussion. And so really up to you all if you would like us to do that in a virtual or in-person setting.
Do you have any idea how long this work session would be?
I would not expect it to go longer than an hour. And that, I think that is under the assumption, if I may be so bold as to say that I don't necessarily anticipate our strategic direction to be vastly different than what we're doing. And so I don't think there's going to be a great need to dig too deep into what do we need to be doing differently. And if you guys agree with that, then I would think we'd be able to do it in an hour.
You did that as a Zoom meeting?
That's what you said if possible, if that's what we want.
That's what I want.
Okay. That's what.
That's
Jeff
fine.
wanted to do.
All right, sounds like you've got a Zoom meeting.
Great, we'll advertise that as virtual only. Thank you. That's everything from me.
Thank you. And folks, we're at our round table.
Are you sending out a survey as to what time they have it? On the same subject? What, it doesn't, says the date, but not the time.
Yes, I can send out, oh, that's a great question, Andrea. Thank you for asking that, as if you guys would like it to be at the standing time of 7 PM or poll you for other times earlier in the day.
Which would be,
Yeah. 7's what we planned, I think.
it doesn't say, so I, 7. That's fine.
Sounds like it's 7 o'clock. Now, it's a good time. Before we go, are there any other items on there? Before we go to the roundtable, just to clarify, I think there might have been something in the packet that had a different title. The slate of officers for 2024 would be Ed Galloway as chair, Tony O'Brien as vice chair, Keith Smith as treasurer, and Christine Jacobs as secretary. I think the treasurer and secretary would go.
No, they're both treasurers, there were two treasurers.
Oh, it was listed.
That was, they're giving one of them at the end of the packet.
But we'll just clarify that for the record. And we'll go to the roundtable. That's you and I.
We still haven't finished our budget. So hopefully Ernie's gonna work real hard over the next couple of weeks and get it done personally. So
We pretty much agree on everything already. It's just.
we're just in that final stretch. You know, we're in the middle of the comprehensive plan, which is still a big deal. Hopefully we will get that done this year. There's no doubt in my mind with the comprehensive plan. We have a lot of zoning updates we're looking to make, and I believe, and Ernie, you can maybe touch on this, from the planning and zoning perspective, but a lot of that looks like to be resolved when we're looking at right after the comprehensive plan, and we're going to get zone ordinance suggestions from our consultants and also our staff and what we've got from the public. So hopefully we're going to take a lot of that in and put it all in one moment, you know. So if you're going to have a meeting with a lot of unpopular decisions, you might as well put the whole high school and start the line, right, Tom?
We'll do it in the election.
That's right. That's right. Just if you're gonna do it, do them all, you know, so. That's gonna be a big part of our year, you know, as it relates to. Water and sewer, we do have a pretty big jump looking up in the future. Here's 15% increase in the valley. You know, water authorities having a hard time keeping up with infrastructure costs, as a lot of us understand the cost of that is significant. So being cognizant of that comprehensive plan, still a lot going on. The budget should be done in a week or so.
Supervisor Reed, and
Yeah, I'll add a couple things to that. We were awarded a TAP grant for the Gladstone Depot. And so Gladstone Depot, on the far south part of the county, is being relocated. It's going to have a new foundation. And we're going to be applying, it looks like, a phase 2, which would be construction on that. So that's something that the county still appears to be, you know, fully supportive of. So that's going forward with us, getting the federal and the state money for that. The other thing is that this month we're going to be initiating our all pieces are finally in place. We have our administrator for it, so and the project coordinator. So we had our initial meeting, pieces in place, and I mean that will be part of this month. And we already have clients in line for it. So I'm hoping that it's going to be a real positive thing for the kid.
great. Great county.
Yes, speaking for Dale, since he is on vacation, We did hire a new county administrator, yes, big deal. Her name's Kathy Shafrick, and she starts June 26th. She comes to us from Fairfax, where she worked for 28 years and did almost every job they had. Her background, educational background is BA in economics, 2 master's degrees, public administration and science management of information systems. So she'll undoubtedly have some ideas we haven't had before. We're looking forward to that. Baker Tilley helped with the employee research. You know, we had a finance director for a while because our finance director retired. She's still hanging in there, and we will start interviewing as soon as our new county administrator has had a chance to get on board and is ready to participate. So she can help with that selection. Okay, that's those 2 things. The comp plan did approve our comp plan. It was a 4-to-1, which usually you go to a 5-0, but in this case it was a 4-to-1. Not exactly stated what the problem was, but there was some general controversy over the clustering comments in the comp plan. Not necessarily among the board, but in general out there in the company process. Might have something to do with that. Nobody can really tell you. We have not heard anything from SEC about the water authority, so that's still hanging exactly where it's been hanging. And sheets opened up on the 27th of May. So now we're, going to be kicking our cigarette jacks and everybody else is into a knife degree. So that's what I got.
Very good, thank you. Supervisor Rob.
Well, we finalized that budget and voted on it, and rather than change the tax rate, we pulled $3 million of fluff over the budget immediately and gave them 3% tax relief, which equates to $3 million, and gave that, but at least the budget's over with. We don't have to put that in. We've been working for years to get some economic development stuff in place. We've already had technology overlay districts to accommodate the things that we have coming in. One of which is what you call it, but it's like a mass production lettuce thing that is
hydroponic.
yeah, and it's they're rolling with that now. And we've got a couple more things that are coming in, which the technology overlay districts were set up for, and they will be started in pretty quickly. So some of the economic development things coming to fruition. What's funny is we've spent millions and millions of dollars in the regional business park. And of course, none of this new industry, not the first one is going in the business park.
You didn't get the Lego factory?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it was most of the state and federal monies that were spent, but still,
Yeah, no.
it's we got anything lined up in the business model, we're getting something there coming in. So we got a business model, we got it lined.
That's one of the, this was a discussion we had as a county, the philosophy of build it and will they come, We have an industrial park that was built back in early 2000s and 90s or whatever. And it was an industrial park, just like how every county was told, if you don't do this, you're falling behind. Well, we built it and it's got a brewery and the water authority.
Well, before we even get anything in, we got to do also this many more maybe to get to the next level.
Right. Certifications and all that.
And you're to level 4 or something like that. Still don't have anything in. The only thing we did do we find that we gotta spend $31 million to get to, businesses that's not in the business park. Get water to that, so. He's spending a fortune to get water to the business park, and then we find out we've got another 31 million to get to the business that is located in the business park. So, that makes it get on board, so.
Our zoning rewrite process is chugging along at this point, probably sometime in late July or early August. I expect our planning commission to deliver to council their final draft, at which point it will become council deliberations and decisions, and possibly adoption sometime around late fall to early winter, but that is still underway. We just received a grant of about $20 million from the state for the renovation and modernization of Beaufort Middle School, which was very good. Our bus drivers are officially unionized now. They held their election and won. I would expect that our fire department will shortly follow as well with a successful election. So we are seeing the first actual unions for public employees in our region, which I'm sure will be very interesting new shift for Charlottesville. And finally, it's older news, but I don't think I ever did. We did get our wage compensation study delivered to us. Gallagher did it, and unsurprisingly, it showed significant wage compression issues as well as our staff compared to the cost of living not really being competitive compared to other jurisdictions. But that's it.
Supervisor. Also have similar issues with our city. And you're scaring me with the park. The big news in Albemarle County is the fact that we took on the right to purchase 462 acres adjacent to the advanced station along 29 North, very close to Greene. And it's instead of, well, partly build it and then kind of buy it and they will stay. But it's been reported a lot in the news, but certainly something that's weighing on our minds and seen as a tremendous opportunity, major impact on the county, I believe, but also not without its risks. So, and we have to have a public hearing because of the possibility that we will distribute, sell off some of this acreage and economic development, and that requires a public hearing. So we'll have that in this month. And see how this is received. I hope people be forward looking. It's already getting a lot of press. So, otherwise, I also similar theme. We had one action that was a 5-to-1 vote. It's originally pretty agreeable on things, and we're really close. Where a neighborhood model type of development recognized several years in that their commercial space, retail space wasn't going anywhere. And they want to convert it to residential. And so they sort of backpedal a little bit on the idea that this was, a neighborhood that was going to have a certain amount of retail. Now it's still going to have essentially what's equivalent to right now the restaurant and coffee shop. But the rest of it is now allowed to be converted to residential. Not to say that they're necessarily going to do it, but that's what they were asking for.
Where is it?
Riverside, it's right next to Garden House.
Yeah.
Close. So, these are the big ones.
That's the one I was making the comment of. If you put office space in there, it's like, the commercial activity is more financially beneficial to the developer to have non-residential in there. But it's taken them so long to get in there and say, well, why can't something go in? I think it's because of its commuter out. there's 120 people out there at that coffee shop by then, but nobody else can walk there to get coffees. They'd be running across basically 8 lanes of people, you know, going up and down 20 and into the cars. The public hearing for the economic, the land purchase, you can, as, you know, you can put public and educational type things on, but anything for business activities, that's the thing that needs the public hearing. So if we were just going to do like public use or educational use, that would necessarily require the public hearing, but you know, that was a big step forward for our project Enable, which is our economic development plan. And if you're interested, a few meetings prior to that decision, we did have a report that was completed by the Defense Affairs Committee, the Charlottesville Chamber of Commerce, the World Cooper Center completed about the impact that the defense industry has on the region. So that's one that if you're interested in, that's what you can read that and see what the results were. We do get our budget finalized right at the start of May. We do not equalize up or down our rate. So our property, the real estate stayed where it's at. We left our car tax where it's at. So the car tax, the values have come down. So if we wanted the same revenue from the car taxes that we wanted the year before, we would have had to raise that rate. About 30 cents. So we left that alone. And that was about foregoing about $5 million to leave that where it's at. Just didn't feel like the used car values, while they're dropping, are not dropping as fast as they went up. So leaving that one where it's at. In that budget are 2 new elementary schools in Albemarle. Not built a new school in quite a while, but we had one in the southern feeder pattern and one in the northern feeder pattern. So that's a big deal. We'll have some new education buildings coming in. It also has room for a second center for our high schools. Which is a different approach our school board is taking in building a new high school. And then the final thing that I share would be the regional housing partnership. I think I reported at the past commission meeting that they agreed to take on the conversation about housing Albemarle's incentive package program and wrestle with that. And that has started to take more of shape. Sounds like that's going to occur in July. And then partnership members will be able to participate, but it will be opened up. The basic idea is that we'll have table participants who will engage in the conversation. Developers, partnership members, etc. But then anybody would be welcome to join and listen into the conversation. And then it'll be set up with a networking session in the middle. So the idea would be that maybe some folks that aren't necessarily sitting at the table, would then have a chance to interact and everybody can talk and discuss, come back to the table for further conversation. So as the chair of the regional housing partnership, I'm thrilled that they're taking this on. I think that jurisdictions can see how the partnership can be used to wrestle with policy issues from other jurisdictions. So I would certainly invite those of you who are elected to see how that conversation goes, even if it's not necessarily developer incentives, and maybe it's some other housing topic, and you can see how the structure goes. And, if it would work for you all to have that kind of brainstorm session, the partnership is there, and this will be our first attempt at showing that as a service as we present it to some of the boards that we have to make presentations on. So that's all I have. Any other items, Christine or Steph?
Yeah, I have two really quick ones. Chair Galloway, as you said that, it dawned on me, I did not send that defense sector report around to you all. So I will do that following this meeting so that everybody has a copy of it. And then the second thing is the strategic plan survey that was sent around to everybody. If you could please take a moment to fill out that survey as commissioners, that would be really helpful to us. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes, and it's, you know, smartphone friendly. So you should be able to do it pretty quickly if you haven't already. That's all.
Good question. Good survey. What did y'all do for your employees? 5 or 7%? Yes. So what did you do? 5.5.
I should qualify, we did 4, but it was basically for non-public safety Yes, because we had caught that up in previous budget cycles. So the 4% was specific for everybody else on the local government side. To get them where our plan said, because we've been working on the circuit, police and fire and EMS and folks like that.
We did it at 5.5, but we also picked up the VRS increases, the insurance increases, all that stuff.
Did we do the VRS? I don't know that. Did we did the VRS? I know we did the insurance. We did the insurance. Okay, that was it.
I'm not remembering what our whole system did. They did something higher than us, I think. Teachers. I'm not remembering that. Great. Well, then our next meeting will be Thursday, June 22nd, a special meeting. That'll be a Zoom meeting, 7 p.m. for the strategic planning work session. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good night, y'all.
Welcome to Ruth, we'll be on.